the consternation from Big 12 fan who believes that you should be ranked with the very best in college football. And I think that's the question we need to tackle today. Because with the college football playoff rankings being announced tonight, we're going to get a much clearer view of who is in and who is out of the college football playoff. And if you believe ESPN has essentially said, these are the only teams that have a chance. And for instance, and such as in like UNLV at 27.5%. Does UNLV have a legitimate shot against the greatest running back anybody's ever seen anywhere ever in Ashton Ginty? They have a chance. Now, is Notre Dame getting in? 100%. Texas, Oregon, Happy Ending Valley, Georgia, yes. But here's my question. When you look at this graphic, it is notably light on Big 12 teams. Is that justified, or is that some preconceived bias? Because I actually think it's justified. I am one of the people who will tell you that I don't believe that the Big 12 and the very best of the Big 12 can compete against the very best of college football. I think it's very difficult to look at the product on the field. And if you want to use BYU, if you want to use Arizona State, you pick the Big 12 team that you think is elite. How can you make the case that any team in the Big 12 is on par with Georgia? I would ask you, how can you make the argument that any team in the Big 12 is on par with what we've seen from Oregon over the last 10 weeks? I don't believe that you can do that. And it doesn't mean that the Big 12 sucks. It doesn't mean that the Big 12 is some terrible league. But when you look at the very best in the Big 12 and you take the team, who do you think is the best team in the Big 12? Right now, I don't know how you say anybody but Arizona State. That's a one-trick pony. If you tackle well against Arizona State and you bring Scadaboo down, you're going to win that game. You want to contain Cam Scadaboo to 125 yards, you're going to win that game. That's as simple as it is. Against Boise State, you look at what we've seen from opponents of a team like Boise State. That's a one-trick pony who has one of the worst strength of schedules in all of college football. But is Boise State significantly worse than Arizona State? I don't think they are. I think that would be a hell of a football game. And Jake, I think that's very telling because I don't believe that Arizona State or Boise State are at all or should be considered elite.
Yeah, I think that, neither of these teams are elite. And I think the Big 12 doesn't have a true, elite candidate coming out of the conference. But I think, for me, the harsh reality is we shouldn't be comparing the Big 12 to Georgia and Alabama. We should be comparing the Big 12 to mid-level SEC team. We should be comparing the Big 12 to the ACC or mid-level Big 10 team, because I don't think the Big 12 has a team that would consistently, even 70% of the time, 7 out of 10 games, would you beat Ole Miss, let's say? Would you beat LSU, let's say, this year? Would you beat, even Indiana in the Big Ten? Would you consistently beat a team of that caliber? So that's why I say I think as far as the college football playoff is concerned, Big 12 fan has been pissed off and been upset and been salty and, lived up to the brand of the Big 12. But the reality is, all of you homers out there who don't want to roll heads and don't want to make changes and want to defend your head coach and want to say that it's okay to be an 8-win team. Well, when you get around to this time of year, it's no longer okay to be an 8-win team, very clearly. And unfortunately for the Big 12, it's no longer good enough to be a 10-win team if you're in Provo or in several other markets in the Big 12. So to me, I look at this and I say, we need to stop putting, again, whatever team, like he said, you want to pick in the Big 12 up against the best teams in the country, because that's not as good as they are. We need to be looking at rankings and saying, hey, are these teams even capable of beating a mid-level SEC or Big 10 team? Because I think that's top of the mountain in the Big 12.
And I don't know why it's taboo, but so many people get upset when I say, hey, The SEC is the best college football conference in the country. It's not a conversation. It's not close. And when we look at the rankings, and again, I understand that they're human beings and they cover MLS. But when you look at the rankings, this is not accidental. It simply is not that Georgia's fifth. Ohio State, who we're going to talk a lot about today, somehow is seventh, and they lost to a terrible Michigan team. And they only fell to 7. That's wild to me. That Indiana lost the only game of consequence, and they're in the top 10. That's wild to me. At what point does strength of schedule matter? At what point can we sit here and can we say Boise does not, they have the worst strength of schedule in the top 20, yet they're ranked 10th in the AP poll? At what point does it become okay to tell the truth? That, again, I don't believe that Boise belongs there. Boise State, you guys understand that Boise State has played nobody, and the team they did play, Oregon, they lost in week 2. And again, I get it. And everybody's going to sit here and tell you, well, at some point that game has to matter. That's what Boise fans were telling me on Twitter last week. The Oregon game's got to matter. Yeah, it matters because you lost. You lost that game, and you don't have a quality opponent beyond that on your schedule.
Are you talking about Boise State, or are you talking about Indiana? Because I can't seem to tell the difference between the two.
I think it matters. And when you start looking at these strength of schedules, do you guys understand that Boise State has the 86th toughest schedule in the country? Do you understand that BYU has the 44th most difficult schedule in the country?
So you mean twice as difficult?
SMU, who I think is a really good example of this, power conference. This is a team that people are putting up as one of the elites in college football, that you will routinely hear supporters say, oh, SMU, 8th team in the country, 75th strength of schedule. 75th strength of schedule. No resume to speak of. No resume to speak of for SMU, but 75th strength of schedule. And what are their big wins? Pitt's a fraud and has been a fraud all season.
Yeah.
That's not a big win. Who did they lose to? The best team they saw. And I would remind you, that game was in Dallas. 18-15, they lost to BYU. They don't have a quality. Is TCU a quality win? Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, and Cal. And now you get Clemson, who accidentally found their way into the championship game. That's not impressive, but it is what it is. It is the system. And if Clemson, again, I'll point at Clemson. Is Clemson more worthy than SMU? No, unfortunately, they're not more worthy than SMU. Because who is Clemson really beat? They lost to Georgia, and they lost to Louisville, and they lost to South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson's season's been defined by Miami losing games they shouldn't lose. That's just what it is.
Is Miami more worthy than Boise? Probably not. And why is that? Because they've been on the edge all season long. You can't lose to Georgia Tech and Syracuse and call yourself a college football playoff team and make the case you're one of the 12 best teams in the country. You lost to Georgia Tech and Syracuse. See you next season.
Yeah.
That's it. At some point, strength of schedule has to matter. And apparently it doesn't. And we want to make the arguments based on emotion that, oh, hey, man, my team belongs in because BYU football does not belong in because BYU football lost 2 games late in the year, and they did it because they can't tackle and they can't catch the football.
Yeah, you did it in ugly fashion. Again, the other just run around all week on Twitter was that, 3-loss SEC teams should be, just shouldn't have any say in the conversation. But the reality is, because of their strength of schedule, they should. Their schedule is typically twice as hard as any Big 12 or ACC schedule, or even the Big 10, I would say. And that's the hard part, is that I agree, strength of schedule should be way more heavily weighted in the conversation. But again, if we weighed strength of schedule more, then the SEC would dominate the college football playoff more than they already are. So the real problem we have here is not emotional Big 12 fan or emotional ACC fan. The real problem we have is that your conferences don't have depth, so your strength of schedule sucks. That's the problem. You don't play good teams in conference play, and then Joey Maguire and Chris Kleiman and several Big 12 coaches want to come out and complain about playing 9 conference games and say that that's somehow a disadvantage.
And then you look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's got the 57th strength of schedule. And we're supposed to believe that Notre Dame's one of the 12 best teams in the country. And I'm a Notre Dame fan through and through. They're not one of the 12 best teams in the country.
But again, this is another thing that always pisses off Big 12 fan. Notre Dame gets a free pass because they're Notre Dame. And you don't have to like that, but it is the truth.
It's the system.
Yeah.
And you don't have to like it. And I agree that it's a mistake. But when I look at these numbers and you look at the teams in the top 20 and you start looking at resumes and you say to yourself, okay, like who's truly an elite team? I think Oregon is truly an elite team. There is, if I look at the chances of these teams making the college football playoff from ESPN, how many of these teams on the top line are elite? Penn State's not elite. Penn State is not one of the 4 best teams.
How many of these teams, when you look at this graphic, how many of these teams have immensely benefited from other teams losing a lot and losing games they shouldn't lose? Like, I look at Penn State, obviously Iowa State, Arizona State, Clemson, I mean, there's several there. And
can you make the argument, and maybe this is an emotional take, I don't know. Could you make the argument that Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country?
Yeah, you can. I think you can, even with the loss to Michigan. Because what are people, and this is really an important point, because I think if you look at this graphic and you look at each team, you say, what's the narrative around your team? This is the narrative around Ohio State. Ryan Day can't win the big game, but they have the best roster in college football, so we're for sure going to put them in the college football playoff, even though they absolutely embarrassed themselves over the weekend. That's why Ohio State is still in there.
But if you look at this graphic, you look at Oregon's got, I think, the best team in the country. Strength of schedule, 60. Georgia, I think the best defense in the country. Number 3, strength of schedule. Texas, 32nd. I think it matters. I absolutely think it matters that they have one of I think, one of the more difficult strength of schedules. I look at Penn State. Is Penn State an outlier at 36 for strength of schedule? Maybe. That offense is going to kill them. We saw it against Ohio State. That offense is going to kill them. But again, South Carolina, I know nobody wants to hear it. Are you telling me that South Carolina is not one of the 12 best teams in the country after what we've seen them do? I think they are. And here's the truth that you really don't want to hear. The system doesn't work. In my opinion, this is why the college football playoff is flawed, because human beings are going to vote on this. You look at the rankings last week. Does that look like the 5 best teams in the country to you on that top line? It doesn't to me. I don't have any doubt in my mind. I have no doubt in my mind. Indiana is not one of the 10 best teams in the country. I know Kirk Cignetti has a 75-year contract worth $80 trillion now in Indiana.
I win. Google me.
But they're not one of the 10 best teams. But that's the system that we're living with.
Well, and I think the other point that's got to be made is if we're unhappy with this system, how unhappy are you going to be when it's in, basically an NFL minor league model and it's full SEC teams? Because that's what's going to happen. You're going to get Texas versus, mid-level ACC team one year, and they're going to run through them and they're going to make it look easy. And people are going to be like, oh, well, we got to change it. Well, you can't change the system every single year. You can't change the system every 5 years. We need a system that decides it on the football field. And again, I would also point out when we talk about does the system work or not, I do think the system works from the standpoint of everyone's talking about it. It's all over everything.
Eight of the top 10 toughest schedules in the country are in what conference?
SEC.
And they play themselves a lot. And you're talking about teams like LSU, Texas A&M, Vandy, Florida, Oklahoma, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi State. Who's got the toughest schedule in the country? Mississippi State. You don't have to like that the SEC is the best conference in the country, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And do I think the Big 12 sucks? Clearly not. Do I think the Big 12, the elites in the Big 12, can slot right into the SEC and be the elites of the SEC? Absolutely not. They're not. We in this conference, as fans of the Big 12 and as people who watch the Big 12 week in and week out, if this season didn't teach you that the elites in this conference are very average, they're very average. As simple as I can say it, the average in the SEC would, I believe, win the Big 12. Mm-hmm. I think Mississippi State would be one of the best teams in this conference. I know
Auburn.
It's crazy. I think when I look at teams like Kentucky, when I look at the mid-table teams, how many wins would Vandy have in the Big 12?
Probably 8 at least.
My guess is Vanderbilt would win 8 games. LSU would win this conference
easily.
I think LSU would win this conference. I think teams like South Carolina could win this conference. I think Alabama. Now, the problem is Alabama and Jalen Milroe. Jalen's gotten exposed a little bit.
Yeah.
You force him to throw the football, keep him in the pocket, you're going to beat Alabama. But you can't tackle Cam Skattebo. What makes you think you're going to tackle Jalen Milroe? Yeah, nothing. Alabama would dominate this conference.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is the cut and quality of athlete. But we don't make these decisions based on hypotheticals.
Well, and the cut of athlete, brings us right back to the head coaching conversation and recruiting and NIL. And I think that, I always bring it up because it seems like once a week on this show, everyone's like, oh, well, you guys just hate this guy or you hate that guy or, you guys are biased towards whatever conference. And I'm just telling you guys, like, I look at, Neil Brown getting fired. If you're an Oklahoma State fan, how are you not looking at that situation saying, yeah, it wasn't good enough for West Virginia. It's good enough at Oklahoma State.
But that's across the conference. Joey McGuire at Texas Tech is going to have to now flip both his offensive and defensive coordinator. I have zero confidence he can do that well. Yeah. Because where is he going to go find those guys? Does he have relationships across college football where he can go get flipping Gus Malzahn to go to Florida State and be the offensive coordinator? Gus Malzahn. I don't think people understand this. Do you guys understand what Gus did? He walked away and they mutually parted. That's one of the most mutual partings of ways I've ever seen. They're not paying him. He's not paying them. And he got the job at Florida State as the offensive coordinator. So one of the most disappointing teams in the ACC just got 2 of the elite available coordinators that you didn't even know were available. They got Gus Malzahn to be their offensive coordinator. And you're hanging on to Dave Aranda at Baylor. And you're hanging on to Joey McGuire at Texas Tech. And you're hanging on to the mullet in Stillwater. And that's good enough. Meanwhile, you've got Kyle Whittingham at Utah losing his offensive coordinator. Do you understand the level of competition for coordinators now?
Yeah.
And are they staying in the Big 12? Did Gus Malzahn wind up in the Big 12? No, he went to the SEC.
And I also think this angle that I also think flies under the radar is how your offensive coordinator helps you go and get a quarterback. Because we've seen multiple times that, hey, this coordinator goes here or there, and then all of a sudden it makes it a lot easier to go out and get that 4-star kid, that 5-star kid who, is going to play quarterback for you. And when you have guys like Kenny Dillingham and other head coaches out here talking about how, you just got to find one quarterback that can kind of define your legacy at a current job. You just got to find that 1-star kid that can really help your team get over the top. Yeah, I think that, coordinators are one of the most important pieces because they help put together an offensive roster. But ultimately, I'm telling you, the Big 12 has a culture problem overall. The Big 12 is cool with not winning. And I think what happened in Utah this year is pretty much an outlier. If you look at the last 10 years, I mean, overall, they've been pretty consistent. This year, obviously, decimated by injury. Okay, right, Utah, fine. Don't include them in this conversation.
Ben Arbuckle went to Oklahoma, not Utah.
Yeah.
And Mac Leftwich is a great fallback option. Offensive coordinator at Texas State, Morgan Scalley, and I know here's the pissed off button that everybody's probably been waiting for. Well, if you're not upset enough about what I said about the Big 12, here's a question for you. Morgan Scalley's one of the elite recruiters in the country, the defensive coordinator at Utah, coach in waiting. He is one of the elite recruiters in college football. What his track record, his wins in recruiting, not questioned.
Yeah.
Can he close an offensive coordinator? Can he and Kyle Whittingham go to Mac Leftwich and say, yep, you need to come to the best move for your career, Mac, would be, why don't you leave Texas State and come to Utah? Because I don't think it should be lost on anybody that Jamarian Ficklin is going to Utah. And he was committed as a quarterback, and he's a really good quarterback, to Texas State. And now he winds up at Utah, and you're telling me that Mac Leftwich isn't going to go to Utah to be the OC. But let's just be real clear about something. Mac Leftwich is not Arbuckle. That would have been a home run win for Utah. But instead, out of nowhere, Oklahoma swoops in and is like, yeah, you don't want to go to the Big 12. Come to the SEC. Come to Oklahoma. Come to Norman. So you took Norman, Oklahoma over Salt Lake City, Utah? Yeah, because it's the SEC. So when we're sitting here talking about is the SEC or is the Big 12 capable of competing with the SEC? No, absolutely not.
Nope.
They're not. And I'm not trying to be a red ass about it. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. I think facts are facts. Ben Arbuckle took Norman, Oklahoma over Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and by the way, I'd point out Salt Lake City is they're a blue blood in the Big 12, right? Oh no, that's right. They're 1 year into the league. So no, the Big 12 doesn't compete with the SEC.
Yeah,
and it really isn't even ain't that close.
I think it's very difficult at this moment to look at where the Big 12 is and to be okay with Dave Aranda, to be okay with Mike Gundy, to be okay with mediocrity, Sonny Dykes, Joey McGuire. And I know I say this all the time, the state of Texas has to be better for this league to compete at the top of college football.
Yep.
Because this, and maybe this is the defining question, is this league the Big 12? Are they anywhere near winning a national championship?
No. Nope. ACC is closer, in my opinion.
And if we look at, I think the ACC is closer. I would agree with that. But if we look at the lines in this league, Iowa State, Arizona State, in Arlington on Saturday morning. I said Saturday morning.
Hey, do you think it was a downgrade to go from Texas and Oklahoma State to Iowa State and Arizona State?
Arizona State's -2 in a neutral site against Iowa State. If Arizona State loses this game, I think that would be horrendous. And my guy, Rocco Bacht, I'm a huge fan, but he has not played well for 6 weeks. And I think Arizona State has that one talent in Cam Scattaboo who can break a tackle and win a game for you. And you better hope that he does that.
Yeah, I think the Arizona State thing, it's a nice story. I love Kenny, love the story, love the the grit, if you will, the narrative of, hey, we're got a ton of momentum in our team right now. We want it more than you do. And I would expect them to beat Iowa State. I would. I think they do want it more. I think that they are playing better football. But, the reality is, all due respect to Kenny, love you, dude. It's Arizona State. It's not Texas. It's not, like if it was Arizona State and Texas Tech, okay, I could feel a little better about that. Then I could say, okay, well, Texas is in your conference championship game. It's Arlington. Like, we got some synergy working here, but it just is not. It's not good. It's not good. And for all the Utah haters and the people who want to say we're a Utah show, this is why it's such a problem, man. You need someone that people respect in your conference championship game.
Could you imagine what it would mean to the Big 12 to have Baylor, to have Texas Tech? Can you imagine with how much passion and want and desire that lives in the fan base for Texas Tech? Can you imagine Arlington on Saturday morning if Texas Tech were playing for a conference championship? Can you imagine Baylor fan? Can you imagine Oak State fan? Sadly, I cannot. I cannot, because none of those programs are close.
Nope.
None of them. It should say something to you that A, Utah came in as a favorite this year, and B, that Deion Sanders did what he did in this conference. And I love what Coach Prime has done, the talent level, the year 2 under Coach Prime, they're competing for a conference championship spot. Yeah! Dude, come on. That tells you, in my opinion, I just don't see that this league is deep. I do not. All right, let's get to the comment section. Always appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for that. The comment section, as always, is presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy app in the business.
Which of you hyenas took Jameis last night?
I did take Jameis last night, mainly because I think so that game last night played exactly the way that I think we all thought it would play, which is Jameis sucks, but he was gonna go to Denver and throw for a ton of yards. I don't think anybody doubted that. And you knew that Jerry Jeudy was going to go off. And his number was 89.5 yards. I took more. Thank you very much. Jameis was 272.5. I took more. Thank you very much. Now, here's where I got piped. No lube, no reach around, nothing nice happened to me last night. Can you do something for me? Because I decided that taking LeBron James to bounce back in a back-to-back would be a good idea. Do you guys understand? All I needed him to do was make a 3. And I figured there's no way, since he's gone 0 for his last 786 three-pointers. I think it is actually 0 for 786. I thought he would make 1. I thought LaCap. I thought LaGeriatric.
LaDad.
I thought LaOld Man.
LaFlag Bearer.
I thought LaKnee Replacement.
LaGM.
Like, seriously, I thought LaMedicare. Like all of the things that I thought about La crappy three-point shooter would all change, and he would make just 1 3-pointer last night.
La Bricklayer.
I thought for certain, but he did not. So taking the demon of 1.5 3-pointers made was a mistake.
La Airball.
La can't make a 3. And maybe I should just start calling him La can't anymore. La can't anymore, James. Stop playing him on back-to-backs, please. Was tragic. Still won $40 last night. I appreciate that because I play flex plays.
Right.
What is my formula on Prize Picks? 3 picks, flex play, Boom. That means you only need to get 2 out of those 3, Jerry Jeudy, Famous Amos, Mr. Jameis Winston, who, and we don't have the bite because Jake doesn't do his job.
Right.
Last night, Jameis Winston, who threw not 1 but 2 pick sixes last night, said, I know I'm better than this. No, you're not. LaCrab Stealer. No, you're not. You're interception guy.
Pick 6.
Yeah. Ask the guys in Tampa if you throw a lot of interceptions. Yes. Did you transform yourself into somebody who isn't committing crimes against Uber drivers in fast food drive-through lanes when you were in New Orleans? You did. You did.
But did you also turn into the guy that said that the team made a team decision to go ahead and punch it into the end zone when you were up 41-17? And then you told Dennis Allen at the time that it was a team decision and you don't give a damn what he had to say? Yeah, you're that guy too.
That's who you are. So those multiple pick sixes on a 500-yard night on Monday Night Football, Jameis, that's exactly who you are.
Yeah, LeJameis play caller. Yeah, that's who you are, bud.
Jackwagon. Cost me $60 on Prize Picks last night. But again, I'm a baller, so I play far too much, but I play $20 flex plays. You can play $2 flex plays, $5 flex plays. You can play all season. And I'm telling you, the college football playoff is the best season for Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the promo code Monty, M-O-N-T-Y, promo code Monty. You deposit $5 in a new Prize Picks account, they'll give you 50 more. No strings attached. It is the single best daily fantasy promotion I've ever seen, and I'm still playing on my $50. Yep. Hook it up, Prize Picks, download the app, wherever you get your apps, use the promo code Monty, open a new Prize Picks account. You deposit $5, they'll give you 50 more instantly. All right, let's see who's first in. Big Blue Horse is a member of the show for 13 months.
Good job, bro.
Big 12 has work to do. Welcome back. Go Gators. Is Florida in a good spot? Like the University of Florida football team.
Yeah,
not the
Florida,
state
man.
of Florida, or Florida, man, but not the state of Florida and Hurricane Alley down there. I don't know. You kept Napes. We'll see. How about that? We'll see. Matt Ritson for $2. Andrew Luck, GM of Stanford, who lose to San Jose State. I think Stanford's tired of losing.
Yeah.
Andrew Luck's a great hire down there. Harry Austin, our favorite San Antonian, a member of the show for 16 months. Let's go. You are wrong. Okay. The Big 12 is all about depth. Where the SEC is top heavy, then it falls off. Okay, let's look at that. Because we've heard a lot about that.
Bro, I thought you just said, hold on. I thought you just said the SEC is top heavy.
In the Big 12, how many, and what standard do we want to use?
Bowl eligible.
How many teams are bowl eligible? Well, 3, 6, 7. Not half of your league won six conference games, rather. Not half of your league won 6 conference games. Okay, bowl eligible. Virginia, 6-6, fired their head coach, right? So if we use that, 8 teams are bowl eligible, half the league. In the SEC, if you look at the SEC, there are 3 teams who are not bowl eligible in the entire league.
Bro.
13 teams are bowl eligible. Okay. What does that matter? Everybody's bowl eligible.
Yeah, there's no depth in the SEC. Okay.
Okay, so Oklahoma, who is 2-6 in conference, 6-6. Where would Oklahoma have finished in the Big 12? Probably middle of the table. That was not a good offense. Oh, so they went and got Ben Arbuckle, one of the best offensive coordinators available. Not a good couple of days for our friends on the Palouse, by the way. But Oklahoma went and immediately upgraded to the one of the best offensive coordinators available. Okay. Vanderbilt, 6-6, 3-5 in conference. And they lost 4 of their last 5 games, including South Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee in a 3-game stretch. Their other loss was to Texas. So let me get this right. You have wins over Alabama, and your losses are to a 7th-ranked Missouri team, a 5th-ranked Texas team, an 8th-ranked Tennessee team, LSU, and South Carolina. And you don't think that's good?
What do you mean the SEC doesn't have depth?
I think you're out of your mind. I totally disagree.
And Harry, dude, you're here every day. I appreciate you so much, but
I just disagree with you.
Well, here's this. This is one of those takes where, yeah, not being harsh. I don't know where you get the assertion the SEC's top heavy. That's what I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to understand here, bro.
The SEC is everything but top heavy.
How do you look at this list of teams in the SEC, right? And you see, okay, what is it? 6 teams they had ranked at one point, or like there was like 7 teams at one point.
They have
this
7
year?
teams ranked.
Like that's
7.
Like that's damn near half the conference.
And if we look at the bracket, and we'll get the rankings tonight, by the way. What do you see here? Well, I see Texas. I see Tennessee and Georgia. Like you're gonna have more in than out. I don't even know how you say they're top heavy and look at this bracket. I don't know how you say they're top heavy and you look at this graphic. I don't know how you say they're top heavy and then you look at strength of schedule and you look at strength of remaining opponents. Dude, what do you mean they're top heavy?
By the way, to the other portion of your comment. Oh, hey, the Big 12 is all about depth. The excuse of, or the insinuation, and I saw this all week long, as I'm sure everybody did. Big 12 fans' biggest defense is, well, hey, we play 9 conference games. We've been beating up on each other. So, of course, we have less teams ranked. No, the problem is you're not beating up on each other because not everybody is good, right? Like you can't say you're beating up on each other when BYU loses a night game at home to Kansas, who they should beat, twice on Sunday.
You can't lose to Kansas at home in your building.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Like, so you're not beating up on each other. You're what you're doing is you're losing games you shouldn't lose, and then you're trying to defend not being ranked and not having a presence, or enough of a presence, I should say, in the rankings and in the AP. That's what you're doing. And again, we talk about the Big 12 damn near every day on this show. So I'm not even trying to hate on the Big 12, but you cannot run from the fact that this conference does not have depth. You have 3 teams essentially that were trying to compete for the Big 12 championship, one of which lost a horrible game at home in BYU. Then Colorado let you down, and Arizona State has just been on the us against the world narrative all year. Mind you, Arizona State was ranked last in the conference, or projected to finish last in the conference, and now they are somehow competing for a conference championship.
And your conference champion is probably not getting a bye week if Boise wins. And I think that's a big if. If Boise wins, your Big 12 champion will not have a bye week.
So, no, with all due respect, Harry, the SEC doesn't fall off. It doesn't fall off,
yeah,
bro.
I just disagree with that.
Doesn't.
Harry also says, here's your problem. What's the difference between South Carolina and Arizona State? Hint, there is nothing. But both are playing the best. They both started too low in the preseason rankings. No. Here's the problem. Nobody watches Arizona State football.
Yeah.
Everybody watches South Carolina.
Yeah. That South Carolina Clemson game was really good.
By default. Nobody, and I've said this all year about BYU, nobody watches BYU. They look at headlines. when it comes to Utah, they don't watch Utah games. They look at headlines.
Yeah.
They read box scores. When it comes to Georgia, Alabama, when it comes to Ohio State,
Because what's the difference?
Oregon.
If you live in Boston, let's say you're a beat writer in Boston and you have a vote. Well, the difference is that you have to watch the Georgia game because that's a game of consequence in the college football playoff. But the BYU game is just a rankings conversation. Okay, if BYU loses, all right, I'm probably going to have them here. If they win, I'm going to have them here. It's that simple. You don't need to, they don't need to watch the game.
I think the difference is you want to watch Alabama. You want to watch Georgia.
Yeah.
If you live anywhere east of the Rockies, you're watching Ohio State. The best teams in the country. If, again, Harry, I'll just look at this graphic. If you look at anybody on that top line, Notre Dame's a great example of this. Everybody watched the Notre Dame SC game. Everybody.
Look at how many teams on this graphic are west or east of the Rockies. Look at that.
And my point being, your conference championship game is at 11 o'clock Central, 11 a.m. Central time. Nobody's going to be watching that because 3 hours later, we're getting the SEC championship game that everybody's going to watch. And I'm not hating. I just think that's the reality. If you look at this graphic, are you watching? The only team on here where I'm like, are you watching Indiana? And I would say, yeah. I think there's a lot of people that are in the Midwest and on the East Coast college football fans that are watching Indiana.
Yeah.
Inexplicably, Indiana, who I just don't think is very good, and we found that out at the Horseshoe. How on earth did you lose to Michigan? And if anybody wants to explain to me, you want to talk about 8-ball Oranda down in Waco? How is Ryan Day still employed? And how is the athletic director coming out with a vote of confidence?
He makes money. That's why. It's the only I've been saying this all year. It's the only reason, the sole individual protector of Ryan Day is that dude makes money. That's it. I'm telling you, because everyone wanted to come out and say, the expectation. I love this hot take by all the talking heads after Ohio State loses to Michigan. Oh, well, now it's definitely national championship or bust for Ryan Day. Well, then what was it before the season? What was it before we got the $20 million roster, best roster in college football, flipping recruits from Alabama? Like, you're telling me the expectation coming into the season wasn't national championship or bust? Of course it was. So the reality with Ryan Day is this dude has time and time again shown us what his ceiling is. Some guys aren't cut out to win the big game or to win the game they should.
Ryan Day should not still be the head coach at Ohio State. You can't. The only game of consequence was Michigan. That was it. And you didn't even compete in that game. And you didn't even. I am at a loss for words as to how Ryan Day is still employed. I am. Lopes fan Gabe, good morning. Big 12 homers shouldn't be pissed at the SEC for being dominant. They should be pissed at nameplates like OSU, TCU, Tech, and Utah for being hot ass.
Yeah, 100%,
Facts.
dude. 100%.
Facts.
And here, let me be a Utah homer. I wouldn't even be upset with Utah this year. I think Utah gets a pass because their struggles were decided by Gatorade coolers and Gator tackling their quarterback repeatedly and, injuries abroad. Like, that's just what happened to you. So, yes, it's disappointing. Yes, brutal season. Yes, borderline embarrassing, frankly. But at least with Utah, you can say, well, their whole roster was decimated with injury.
Correct.
So their season basically ended, 4 weeks in or whatever it was. But I would agree with this sentiment that generally speaking, yeah, you should be talking about these mediocre ass head coaches who seemingly get a free pass every year and do nothing about it. Like, it's terrible. You're here.
Mountain Mama, a member of the show for 16 months. And Mike, while I was on vacation sunning myself, like a whale ass on the beaches of Maui. I want you to know that I heard the Hawaiian version of West Virginia, Mountain Mama. And I thought of you, Mike. And I wondered aloud, I wonder how happy Mike Smith is today that Neil Brown's fired. And I'll say, West Virginia fan, I'm happy for you.
It finally happened.
The billboards worked. Neil Brown's not good enough to be the head coach at West Virginia. And West Virginia made a statement that what Neil Brown's done is not good enough. And we expect better out of our football program because we're not Baylor and we're not Texas Tech and we're not Okie Light. We're West Virginia. And I say,
hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Way to go, Mike. I'm happy for you.
By the way,
Neil Brown fired. I reached my 21 quota in one day.
Dude, that's my guy right there, dude. Attaboy, bro.
21.
Oh, Mike, I hope you're well. You just made my point. They are not watching Arizona State in the Big 12. The Big 12 has no elite programs, which is the problem. 100% correct. I think they don't. There's not an elite program. So that's why I say there's no elite program in the Big 12. What makes you think that they're better than the SEC?
Yeah.
Or on par? Because I've heard all of this about how BYU can compete with Georgia, or no, they can't. I love what BYU's done. What have they done? 10 wins, 3 of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Great season.
Clearly improving.
But if you look at who's Alabama, Jalen Milroe or Jake Retzloff, I'm actually taking Jake Retzloff.
Yeah, I think he's a better pure quarterback.
Wide receivers, I'm taking BYU's wide receivers. That's where it ends. That's it. The lines, Alabama. The secondary, Jacob Robinson, yes. Everybody else, Alabama. Linebackers, Alabama. Edge, Alabama. Offensive line, Alabama. Running backs, Alabama. It's not, and I don't think it's close.
Coordinators?
I really like Jay Hill. I think Jay Hill is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country.
You know who I'm talking about. Aaron Roderick.
The guy drives me crazy.
And
I think I know we've talked about this with BYU all season long. Aaron Roderick's part of the problem at BYU. You'll never hear that. Nobody will ever say that. Aaron Roderick will not be replaced. Aaron Roderick is not a good play caller. How many times are we going to throw the ball down the field, like go for a home run play on first down and then play for 2nd and 10 and then 3rd and 8 and then punt?
I think it's a great point because before vacay happened, we were talking about BYU and Arizona State, right? We were talking about, hey, gotta go down to Tempe and handle business. What did we say you couldn't do early in that game if you wanted to win the ball game? Well, can't be taking deep shots on first down on your first possession and think that that's going to end well for you. What did we get? 2nd and 10, deep shot down the field, incomplete, 3 and out, ball game's over. That's what we got. And I have to say, there are times when I'm watching BYU and I'm like, man, love the RPO call there. Like the SMU RPO was a phenomenal thing. What everybody forgets is Jake audibled into the RPO.
Yes, he did.
That wasn't a play call out of Aaron Roderick.
And the thing that this is the Iowa State conversation.
Yeah.
I love Rocco Becht. I love him as a competitor. I think he is not good enough to be a conference championship caliber quarterback.
Yeah. So again,
the last month, Iowa State's gotten exposed a little bit here. And so now you're in a situation with, when we talk about the Big 12, SEC, ACC, you're in a situation now with the ACC and the Big 12 where you have 2 teams that nobody gives a hot ass about.
Yeah.
I saw that video in Florida or in Hawaii as well. And
hot ass.
I could watch that video 100 times. Nobody gives a rat's ass about Iowa State and ASU. Nobody knows the Fighting Dillinghams. 9 out of 10 football fans in this country don't know who the starting quarterback at Iowa State is.
Yeah, you notice how much media Kenny Dillingham's doing? Why do you think that is? You think he wants to be doing that much media?
No.
You think a guy who is an absolute football junkie, which I love about Kenny. You think that dude really wants to be sitting in his office on camera for, I don't know what, probably 2 hours a day doing interviews? No, he doesn't. But he has to because the Big 12 needs him to do that. So I'm just telling you, with all due respect here, I don't think we've proven your point. I think that you're running from what you said about the SEC. And I don't think that you want to admit as a Big 12 fan that you hate the SEC because they are deep, because they have earned more spots in the college football playoff. And that's fine. If a Big 12 fan would just say that, I'd be like, yeah, dude, I get it. I'd hate the SEC too. I'm with you. I understand.
I think that the issue is that we don't know who the best team in the Big 12 is, because for a hot second, it was BYU. For 3 weeks, it was Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think for the last 3 weeks, it's Arizona State.
Yeah, and it was Iowa State at one point.
But I don't know who that is right now. And I don't know that there is a best. It's the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Who's the best team in the Big Ten?
But see, at least in the Big Ten, we can say, okay, well, on any given year, right? This year, any year you want to point to, it's one of the three. And now one of the four because of Oregon, right? Oregon, Penn State, Michigan,
I think Ohio State is massively disappointing.
Yeah.
I think it is one of the most humiliating seasons I've ever seen out of Ohio State. And John Cooper was really not great. And Ryan Day, obviously Michigan sucks out loud. I look at Indiana, I think that's an average-ass football team. I look at Oregon. I think they've had moments. Is that an elite football team? We're going to find out.
Yeah, I think what's difficult with Oregon is you're going to have a really hard time saying they're not elite based on the last 15 months of their football program.
Okay, but you lost to Washington, who was clearly better than you multiple times. And I just asked this year, what's the big win where you're like, well, goddamn, that's one of the best teams in the country? Because now it's not Ohio State. Because Ohio State is not elite. Sorry, you're not elite. You're great on defense. Phenomenal on defense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to think of Will Howard. I love my guy, Will Howard.
So so just to play devil's advocate, if Ohio State's not elite anymore, does that make the Michigan win better? Like, Michigan beat Ohio State, the second-ranked team in the country at that time, right, over the weekend. And Oregon,
Michigan sucks. Michigan sucks. Michigan is not a good football team. They're not a bar. They're untalented. Even when they're healthy, they're not talented. They're not well coached. They do not execute.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan's not a good football team.